So this is for my friend Casey. We don't always get an opportunity to collect flagging. Casey goes above and beyond. But when you can, it's nice to collect this and get rid of it so it's not floating around the forest for 20, 30 years like it will. You're about to witness good compression in a saw. It has nothing to do with the lack of strength in my arms. So shout out to LNS for a solid 500i build. So what you're seeing here is I'm taking another look up the tree. If you see my body positioning here, I'm tied up against the tree and I'm not on the backside. And so far, it's been a minute since I've really looked at this full tree. I sized it up at the beginning of the day and kind of forgot about it. So you'll see me here come to a realization of something I missed as I'm shaving a little bark here, which I'll talk about later. But yeah, check this out. You'll see me come to a realization here in a second. So what I realize is, and you can't see it, but there's a second tree growing out of the back of this tree. It's about 10 inches, and I forgot about it. And I hadn't really fully looked up as I'm doing that initial kind of lay size up. And so what I'm doing is I'm contemplating, what do I do? It's school marms at about 7.5 feet. I can reach it with my 36-inch bar. Do I rip down the union and cut it the other way, or do I take them together? And I think I talk to myself a little bit here. Maybe I try to talk to the camera. Yeah, I'm trying to talk to the camera. I'm telling you, there's two trees here. So that's what's going on. So depth of an undercut is so important. You can see I get in on my horizontal cut. I stop at a point close to my gun. I take a peek, look at the ratio, and now I'm sizing things up again, right? It's an ongoing process. I'm looking, is my depth, does my depth relate to my tree and the situation the way I want it to? Is the ratio correct? And I play around with that, right? It's a feel thing. I'm not saying by any means I have it down to a T, but after so many years of doing this, you start to get a feel for the right ratio. And so I found it, and I go for my sloping cut. I'm happy with it, and here we go. This is the money-making shot. So you gotta love an undercut. I go to check. I talk about this later, but it's tight quarters falling. I want to make sure I'm not messing around here. I take a peek. There's nothing wrong with that. On the production side of things, someone might say you're wasting time, but we're not selling timber here. We're making campgrounds safe for folks. So I took a second to take a peek, and I liked it. So I kept on going.
All right, friends. Let me show you what I got here. Nice clean undercut. I just sniped out a little bit in the middle, and I call it sniping out. That's not a true snipe in timber terms, but I can explain to you later why I call it sniping out.
So let me interject a little bit on this video. First, you can see in the beginning, I take a little bit of time with, I guess if you will call it, my size up. I had already looked at the tree a little bit, and I had identified that that second, I don't know, 10-inch kind of stump sprout at one point. I'm not sure exactly how that tree grew into it, or if it was a stump sprout or what, but regardless, I had identified that. But as I walk back up to the tree, right, I hadn't seen the tree in probably another an hour or so. As I walk back up to it, I'm taking my time. I'm assessing that again, looking at it. And I had mentioned in the video I wasn't quite sure when I had identified that in my cut, and watching the video back later is I think my mind had thought like I started my horizontal cut and I wasn't entirely sure of my plan, but I was, if that makes sense. Like I had, and you can see in the video, I spent my time looking at it. I talked about, I threw up the 2 trees, and so I had a plan going into it. I just you just are, oh, that's the thing, it's a constant evaluation, a constant, if you feel something on the saw, if you see something change in the tree, you should always kind of go into it realizing that you could need to make an adjustment. So so that was that. Spent my time kind of resizing things up, looking at my lay. It was a tight hole, don't get me wrong, it was a tight lay. There's trees out there. We're at a campground. You know, you don't want to leave a damaged product, bunch of widowmakers, hangers up there. You got family, kids walking around. So you want to leave a good product. So I was being meticulous in my lay. So that's what you saw in the beginning there. And then I'm not much of a bark shaver by trade, but every now and again I will, if it's a very tight, precise lay or cut. But the reason I did on this one, and I didn't really show it well in the video, is it had a nice kind of stump swell, or root swell, if you will, that I thought my power head might, it might get in the way of my undercut. So I just went ahead and shaved it off. That's what you saw me, you couldn't see that well, but that's what I was doing, what looked like shaving the bark, because I was getting rid of a little swell down there. So those are 2 things I wanted to address. And then the other was the when I called it sniping, and you can see after I get my undercut out, right, and it lined up pretty good. They don't always line up exactly right. Again, I'm not in a rush. I mean, we're trying to get a job done. These campgrounds don't open up until end of June, and it's beginning of April. But yeah, you're always in somewhat of a production mode. But also too, there's values at risk, right? You can see there's a truck back down the cut bank. We've got hose spigots, septic tanks. And again, like I said, we're at a campground, so other trees, like it's not just willy-nilly falling. You're lining things up so you're not creating a bigger mess in a sense. So, so yeah, when I get my undercut out, you take a couple seconds on some cleanup. And you can see the first couple times I'm using the bottom of my bar, kind of getting some cleanup, you're wearing your eye protection, but what I like to do, and I tell people this when I'm teaching younger sawyers on crews or whatever, is when you have the time, right? And you don't always, like I said, primarily we're cutting snags, fire weakened trees, stuff on fire. It's more about getting it down safely, but it doesn't have to be like perfect in a sense. Because a lot of times it can't be, like you got embers falling down, whatever. But when you have the time, and this is pretty green trees we're cutting, I get fine. It's like the fine paintbrush. So I like to flip the saw over, use the top of my bar, and I get right behind my power head because I'm shooting chips away from me. So I'm not worried about catching something in the lip or in the eye, especially if I'm wearing eye protection. But like, even with, sometimes you can get some stuff in your eye. So, and I'm looking down my bar, just looking over my bar and through my full wrap, and it's amazing. You should try it because you can just accurately nibble at what you need. And so I lined it up. I had the thinnest of little Dutchmen in there in the center, kind of, and I wouldn't even call it a Dutchman. It's just where your two curves line together and like the wood fell out before it like really hit that apex. So I just was in there nibbling it out and got probably a little more fine than I needed to, but I wanted it to be nice and clean. So anyways, that's what I was doing there. That's what I was calling sniping out, because you're kind of looking down the barrel in a sense. You're not, like I said, it's not a true snipe in a timber term as far as like cutting off the front of your face or your slope to like add a more of a butt drop or a direction change or whatever. But it's kind of the action of like looking down the barrel, getting real fine in cleaning up your face cut. So that's what I meant by that.
But this is interesting, really interesting. I kind of got ahead of myself, and that happens, but I forgot this thing goes up in a twofer. It's a low school marm, and I can't remember when I noticed it in my cut, but I'm committed now. Well, I'm not committed. I'm not. Frankly, I'm not. If I really wanted to right now, I could come in and shave down the crotch right at the union, and I could cut this way. But when I was at my certification a couple years back, well, a year ago now, actually, for my highest level of falling, I had a tree just like this, on a very steep slope. Actually, the slope, it was this way with the tree. And just like this though. And actually a little bit different. It was joined down here and it came out. The union wasn't as low. So what I did is I had enough room in here to slip my bar in, put a face, a back cut, and wedge just to get that cut in there and weaken it. But I think this is included enough and I'm low enough to where I could take this as one. It's hard to see what's going on up top as far as how tangled the tree is. So there's a possibility. There's a good possibility. As this thing goes, that union's not strong enough, it tears off and it's off to the races. So it's something I have to be heads up for. With that in mind, and with what I got going on here, all my limb weight on my right side here where I cut my face out, I'm gonna finish on the other side. I'm gonna finish over here. I've got a couple trees to get out of the way, get behind, and honestly, if I could time it with that wind, I don't know if you can see it, those tops are swinging a little bit. If I could time it with that wind, you see these move together actually. Now that I'm looking at it, they move together. So that's a good sign that their crown, the smaller crown, is somewhat interlocked with the main bowl and what we got going on here. So I'm fairly confident it's gonna do what I'm thinking it's gonna do. But anyways, with that limb weight heavy on the right side, I'm gonna choose to finish on this left side. So I'll set you guys up back here, and hopefully my phone doesn't get crushed, and hopefully it gives you a good idea of, or you can get a good view of what's gonna happen here. Move some sticks, try and build you guys up a little bit. You can watch it come down in its hole. Just be mindful of what I'm doing here. Not recommended for someone new into their falling career. And I'm not saying I always say this, I'm not saying I'm the best at anything, or even, I always like to learn. So this is a learning, fairly low consequences. Obviously, safety is always a big consequence. I'm rambling, let me get the cutting.
So I realized I was rambling, and I decided I just wanted to start cutting and get this thing on the ground. But what I want to touch on here is humility and how important that is when you're running a power saw. You could be doing it 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, always being open to learning new things and experimenting within a safe manner is important, because if you do something and it doesn't go how you expect, it doesn't mean you're a failure. It doesn't mean you don't know what you're doing. It just means that sometimes Mother Nature is Mother Nature, and it doesn't always go exactly as planned. So what I did there, you probably heard, is I started my saw, then I turned it off again, and I called out my back cut because there are a couple other followers around, and we had seen some public in the campground at one point. What I'm doing here is just checking my level. I'll talk on this more later, but you'll hear me. Right there, and then I kind of realized, I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm just telling you, I'm going to be able to realize what's going on here pretty quick. So take a watch.
Okay, well, that's exactly why I wasn't sure what it was gonna do, because that bark inclusion came down low. So you see my saw got sat on just a hair, right? Well, this is where you pick and choose your battles, right? I had heavy limb weight on this right side that I did not want to get hung up in that tree. And I wanted this thing to go fast. and I got a little bit looking up too much on my cut to where I cut a little far on my corner. I cut a corner, I did. But you can see how much holding wood I have on this side. And I'm not saying this is necessarily right. I should have left a little bit more in here. I should have. Absolutely. But the tree's in its hole. Everyone's safe, and we got it to go the way we planned, in a sense. I got a little trigger happy here, right there, and I cut a little bit of my offside corner. Now, in a perfect world, like I said, I would have had more of, instead of this angle, I would have had a little bit more of that angle, and just left barely a corner there. Because I knew it was good wood, I knew it was going to hold, but I needed it to have a little bit of freedom, if you will, on this side to get out of, to hit this and get out of that tree, right? To get out of it. So I could have, and again, this is stuff that production followers probably know way more about than I do. We primarily do snags, fire weakened trees, and the like, but I could have maybe released more on this side, right? And then had, as it goes, as it falls, it swings in and rotates, and then releasing all those limbs off of that tree that it was on, right? So as it rolls in, it'll release off. However, in my opinion, you could have it both ways, and I'm not sure if this is right or wrong. It's just the way I go about some things. And like I said, we're here sitting safe, minimal brushback. But in this sense, as it goes and it wants to push, this can actually somewhat turn, and it's pivoting off this still, maintaining its line, its directional line, but giving a little bit of weakness here. So as it goes, it can give a little bit of roll off of that too. So anyways, that was a fun one, something different. Like I said, I got a little trigger happy. You saw me kind of wrestle it there. Had I had overhead hazards on my left side, I would have ditched the saw, but I felt fairly confident in what I had there. So you can see I just cut it off just a hair there. So anyways, yeah, saw's fine. Sometimes, you just kind of give it a wiggle as she's going and see what you can get out of it. Austin's over there telling a tree to go the way it doesn't want to, which is always fun. It's another good faller over there. And then thinking about the other thing is, so I start my back cut, right? You see I kind of came out, got in. I checked level. Again, we're at a campground. I want things to be precise. So I checked my level. And what I'm saying to you as I'm starting is, and you might have been able to hear it, is I said you're going to be able to tell early what's going to happen with that second tree, because if that bark inclusion wasn't going to be strong enough to take it with it, I was going to feel it. And I did. I got in my back cut, and as I entered the tree, I felt the slightest bit of weight on my bar. So that's when I stopped, took a look up, made sure it wasn't like going the opposite way, the small tree, and I sunk that little wedge, and I shirted up to where I felt it got the weight off my bar. And then as I came further in, I followed up that wedge to make sure it was staying, that it was influencing that small tree to stay, and not I guess gaining separation in that bark inclusion as the main bowl was starting to gain some momentum the other way. So that's what I was doing there. And then at that point, like I said, it was kind of a game of up and down, up and down. I was on the good side,
It's pretty flat ground, so it wasn't a high-low side. It was more of a good side, bad side as far as limb weight, brush back potential, and then kind of my eyesight of the lay, because on that side of where I took my face out, the right side of the tree, there was another bowl, the one that it was brushing up against, that I couldn't quite see out in the distance. So I wanted to be on the left side. And that's where I talk about kind of choosing your battles is, was I going to be dead eyes locked on my gunning sight and seeing when I'm hitting my gun sight and stopping, or was I going to be watching a top and that second tree, seeing if there's going to be any separation? Because like I said, if that thing started to go backwards, that second tree is off to the races and I'm out of there. I'm off the stump. But if it's going good, then I have a little bit more time to make sure it's where I want it, and if I needed to nibble some here. So anyways, I talked about at the end, kind of as the tree rotate and wanted to roll, right? It's rotating off the stump and then it decided to roll. I was going for that in the sense of, like I talked about, I wanted it weaker on that bad side with the limb weight, because as it was going to brush that tall fir, which I didn't really want to damage, I didn't want it to just like, bust its way through. I wanted it to be able to kind of roll off of that and nicely fall into that hole. So yeah, I told you, I cut a corner. That's not ideal. You pick and choose your battles, especially when you gain that experience and gain that confidence and start to understand how things work. There's a time and a place for everything, right? There's a time and a place for a Dutchman. And I've seen some severe Dutchmans used to great advantages. I've also seen severe Dutchmans where you can tell they don't know what they're doing. So again, it wasn't necessarily exactly how I wanted it, but that's the beauty of going into it with a plan and knowing that, yeah, if it's like, not every, I just went to a basketball game. Not every 3-pointer is a perfect swish. Sometimes they hit the rim and then they go in, right? Sometimes your cut isn't exactly where you wanted it to be, but it does the job. So yeah, and you could see as that tree went, it does what I talked about. It rolled to that left side because that right side was weakened. It was able to roll up and out. And so again, that's just kind of the nature of how it goes. You go in with the plan, and like I said, you never know. It could start to walk away from you and you have to abort. As far as my saw, because I cut a little bit far on that far corner, it wanted to kind of pinch and sit on that tip a hair. I knew it wasn't a drastic amount, and I also knew that as it went, I thought, or in my head, I imagined it was gonna kind of roll to that left side. So I was hanging on there. I felt comfortable with my overhead hazards. I was watching it, kind of feeling the saw, and as if it was gonna go, I was gonna let it take it. But it didn't, and so it all worked out. But yeah, that was a fun one. It was, I don't know, probably 105 foot white fir. But yeah, that's kind of my thought process going through that, and the explanation of what went on in that video.